Very good. My name's Mark Haynes. I'm the President of the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Business Association. On behalf of the team, thanks all for joining us this evening, either via Facebook Live or in the live audience. And for people joining us on Facebook Live, I should let you know we have around about 70 people here this evening in the live audience. So it's a really good showing, and we're really looking forward to a good night tonight. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders both past and present. I also welcome SGLBA Live members and thank our legal partner, Landra & Rogers, for hosting us in their lovely offices here this evening in the CBD. I also want to thank our media partner, the Star Observer, and specifically Sebastian Rice, Chair of the Star Observer, who will be moderating this evening. I'd also like to welcome and thank the Lord Mayoral candidates for participating this evening during what is a busy campaign period, and I welcome any members from their teams here this evening as well. Doing a bit of research, I confirmed what I'd always known, and that is that Sydney is quite the powerhouse. The Global Cities Index recognises it as number 14 in the world based on global engagement. The city has been ranked 11th in the world for economic opportunity. And the GDP of the city in 2013-14 was estimated at $108 billion, which is 7% of the total national economy and almost a quarter of the entire GDP for New South Wales. 40% of the headquarters of the top 500 Australian corporations are located in Sydney. On an average weekday in 2012, 437,000 people worked within the city, 22% in finance and nearly 18% in professional and business services. The city is the workplace for 21% of the entire finance sector, 15% of the total information, media and technology industry, and 11% of the creative and performing arts activity in Australia. Sydney, Australia's only global city, hosted over 2.8 million international visitors in 2013, or nearly half of all international visits to Australia. These visitors spent 59 million nights in the city and a total of $5.9 billion. On average, the tourism industry contributes $36 million to the city's economy per day. Wow. So Sydney is quite the engine room for the whole country. How it's governed affects a great many people, residents and businesses alike. Tonight is about providing the lead candidates the opportunity to share with you their vision for this wonderful city for the next 4 years. It's about providing constituents the opportunity to question and engage with candidates. So once again, welcome. I'm delighted to introduce to you now the Chair of the Star Observer and your moderator for the evening, Sebastian Rice.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you everyone for coming here tonight. I just wanted to remind all of you, please turn your phones to silent because we do have an internet audience here tonight and we would like to make sure that they can hear everything without listening to your phone calls. There's also bathrooms near the reception, so if you need to make a pit stop, please duck out discreetly towards the back. In terms of this evening, we're going to start this evening with each of the candidates speaking for roughly 4 to 5 minutes about themselves and answering 3 topics that we've asked them in advance. We will be trying to keep everyone strictly to time so that we can get through as many audience questions and online questions as we can. In terms of this set of questions themselves, we asked the candidates some very straightforward things. The first thing that we asked, because this is a business association, we asked, do you support businesses being able to vote in the election for the City of Sydney? And if so, why should businesses vote for you as a candidate? The second question we asked was regarding the policies of each of the candidates towards the LGBTI community. So one of the things that people often forget is that there's more to our community than Oxford Street and Taylor Square. So we've asked candidates to also reference how they'd look at delivering services better for our community across the overall City of Sydney area. And the third question we asked was based around the thought that seems quite common in the community that there might be a bit of a shake-up in terms of the makeup of council after this election for various reasons. Then we were wondering how each of the candidates might be able to work with a council where they were not the only party in power. How would they be able to work with other people? So those were the 3 questions we've asked in advance, and we're hoping that people will be able to touch on those at the very least when they talk through their opening statements. So I'd like to introduce you to Clover Moore, who's our first speaker this evening. I think in some ways Clover's the person who needs the least introduction of all of us. But Clover has obviously been the Lord Mayor of Sydney since 2004, I believe, with decades of experience as a community representative for this inner city area of Sydney at both state and local government levels. She's seeking re-election this term with a team of independent candidates, which includes community figure Karen Phelps. Over the recent term of office, her team has held a majority of seats on council, and during this period, the City of Sydney has successfully reported profits in its most recent periods, even though there have been quite a few investments in things like urban renewal projects and community initiatives. Please join me in welcoming Clover Moore.
Thank you, Sebastian, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'd first of all like to acknowledge the original custodians of our land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge the people of the 200 nationalities who live in our city, and especially tonight to acknowledge the LGBTI community. So, I've always supported business having the right to vote, and what I've heard from business is that they want stability, integrity, and results. While I've been Lord Mayor, we've had 6 Prime Ministers and 6 Premiers. Meanwhile, over a decade, my independent team has provided progressive, stable, inclusive and corruption-free governance, and our record is compelling. We've achieved a strong financial position with no debt. In the last 12 years, we've invested $1.2 billion in infrastructure and community facilities, completing 250 projects, including playgrounds, pools, libraries, theatres, childcare centres and community spaces. We've led action on climate change and supported our cultural and creative life of our city. We've worked to increase the supply of tourist accommodation, and visitor numbers have consistently grown. Since I became Lord Mayor, the city's economy has grown by 80%, or $50 billion. We've approved $26 billion worth of development, and there's an unprecedented $40 billion investment in private development expected over the next decade. We've become one of the fastest growing residential areas in New South Wales, and job growth is increasing at twice the rate for metropolitan Sydney. 200 new businesses have been created, leading to 50,000 new jobs. We've worked to broaden the city's economic base. We've always, as Mark has said, had a strong financial sector, and we've helped develop similarly strong clusters around education and research, creative industries and information, communication and technology. We've become the primary hub for tech startups in Australia. 64% of startups are here in our city, and our tech startup action plan encourages further growth. All our work has resulted in Sydney becoming one of the most livable cities in the world, a fact highlighted in global surveys. This is critical because the places where people want to live are also the places where they want to work and visit. Our work has made it easier for you to compete in the fierce global market for talent and tourism dollars. For the future, we have $1.8 billion budgeted for new projects and facilities over the next 10 years. Our new planning controls for Central Sydney will unlock 2.9 million square metres of floor space that could provide 100,000 jobs and 10,000 new dwellings, adding $21.2 billion to the city's economy. Addressing you tonight is of special significance for me. My first LGBTI community audience was a Sydney Gay Business Association dinner in 1982, shortly after I became a councillor, and I was called an alderman back then. And I came with Tim Wilson. Some of you might have known him. Throughout my public life, I've always recognised that the LGBTI community is much more than Oxford Street. As an elected representative, I've sought to work with you as a friend and a supporter, but have always respected your right to set your priorities and determine your destiny. I was guided by the community introducing legislation outlawing vilification of homosexuals and to allow same-sex couples to adopt children, both now law, of course. I supported your campaigns for equal age of consent, recognition of your relationships, and your fight against HIV and AIDS. In 2005, my team was responsible for Council adopting the first resolution supporting your priority issues, which led to the city's first LGBTI project coordinator. It continues to guide our work, and we continue to build on it as new issues and needs arise. We recognise the iconic and historic significance of Oxford Street, and are committed to a permanent artwork at Taylor Square to celebrate the LGBTI community. We know there are different ideas for T2, including that it become an LGBTI museum. When we sought expressions of interest, we included a museum as a possible use, but no proposals were received. I support the establishment of an LGBTI museum, but I think it's critical that it's community-run and not council-run. Just imagine a Conservative city government with the power to change or censor exhibitions that the council was uncomfortable with. We've seen what a mess the major parties have made at federal level with the issue of marriage equality, a basic human rights issue. Labor failed to change the law when they're in power, and now the Liberal National Government, strong-armed by the far right, are imposing a costly and divisive plebiscite. Our independent team is strongly committed to working with you to achieve marriage equality. We've advocated strongly against the plebiscite, but if it goes ahead, we've already committed to a powerful yes campaign, including providing the Australian marriage equality with office space and a shop front. I'm proud that one of the most passionate, effective advocates, Professor Karen Phelps, is a key member of our team. This is a critical election. I'm seeking re-election as Sydney's Lord Mayor with a strong and talented team to keep our city independent and progressive. There's only one guaranteed way of ensuring that, and that is by re-electing our team with an effective majority. Whatever the outcome, I am committed to continuing to work with the LGBTI community to help you achieve your priorities and realise your aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Christine Forster. Christine is the candidate for the Liberal Party for Lord Mayor of Sydney and has been a councillor over the last term of office. Christine lives in Surrey Hills with a long-term partner, Virginia, and their children. And she's been, as many of you would have noticed over the years, a very vocal advocate for marriage equality, as well as other issues facing our community. Please join me in welcoming Christine to the stage.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian, and thanks for having me here. It's wonderful to be here amongst friends, new and old, and there are a lot of people I know that are in the audience who I can see, but I haven't actually yet met Ian Roberts, but I can see him. He's in the back row. But his head is about half a foot higher than everybody else's, so hi, Ian. Look, we've been asked to talk about to address a couple of questions. The first one is the business vote. And there can be absolutely no doubt that the businesses in the City of Sydney should have a say in the future operation and government of this great global city of ours. Businesses have always had the right to vote, but up until the changes that were introduced in the law in 2014, that was an elective right. It's now compulsory, but let's bear in mind that these businesses contribute nearly 80% of the rate's income that council then gets to reinvest in the community services and infrastructure that we all need, that we all want, and that makes our city a great and vibrant place to live in. So, on that note, it's great that we're here in a business environment again tonight, the SGLBA Forum, which of course is a terrific community group which does provide a lot of service for our community in terms of networking. And I was talking to June outside this evening before we came in, and he mentioned the fact that he's got an event coming up, but he wanted to make sure that he got all businesses in to that event, because we're not just gay and lesbian businessmen and women, we're just businessmen and women, and that's the important thing to note, and that's what we're here to do. Is we're here to create business, which then generates a great amenity in our local areas, in our villages, and makes them better places to live for the residents. In terms of the business vote, though, I imagine that a lot of you businessmen and women in the SGLBA probably only vote as residents because you live in the City of Sydney. So it's one vote for one person, as you know. In terms of questions about Oxford Street and the future of Oxford Street and my commitment to the community beyond Oxford Street, obviously I have a plan for Oxford Street. I've been very clear about that we need to take a holistic approach to Council's very extensive property portfolio on the north side of Oxford Street. I'd like to see that let out under a long-term lease to an operator, an expert operator who knows how to attract and retain the right kind of retail and commercial tenants for that piece of property. If we can do that, if we can get that reactivated, the supposed cultural hub has not been a success in my view. If we can get those properties full of activated commercial businesses, retail and office businesses, we will go a long way towards reactivating the entire street. In terms of my commitment to the community outside of Oxford Street. Obviously, there are many things impacting us, one being the lockout laws. I have been an advocate for the winding back of the lockout laws. Obviously, we're waiting for the handing down of a report from the Callanan report from the state government, which is due later this month. Hopefully that will involve some kind of winding back of the lockout laws, because they have really had a very big impact on not only the late night economy in our late night precincts like Oxford Street. It's had a very big knock-on, flow-on impact on the daytime economy in those areas, and that affects all of us as residents and as businessmen and women, small and large. Obviously, I am a very strong advocate, as Sebastian mentioned, for marriage equality. I will continue to do that. We are looking at probably having to fight a plebiscite. The yes case on that needs to be very well organised. It needs to be united. It needs to be something that brings the community together to make a change that I very firmly believe will be a great one for our country. It'll be a very positive thing for our families. It'll be a positive thing for our communities and for our nation. It is something that I think the upside to the plebiscite will be that it is a decision, when the reform is embraced, that we can come together and support as a nation, as Ireland did. We might not want to go to a plebiscite, but if we go to a plebiscite and we win it, which I firmly believe we will very comfortably, it can be a unifying force for our nation. On the third question, the makeup of council. Well, I've been very firm that if I'm elected as Lord Mayor, I will give each and every one of the 10 councillors, irrespective of their political party, a portfolio of responsibility that reflects their interests and expertise, and that enables them to become leaders in their own right, in their communities, and to drive the change that they want to see in their communities. Because we are all in this because we are committed to making a difference to our city, to our world, and if we can give that responsibility, hand that responsibility over to those individuals who are committed to that principle, we will get a better outcome for our entire city, which is what this is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Next up is Lindsay Johnston. Lindsay is running as the candidate for the Greens Party. He identifies with the rainbow community and runs a forensic analysis consultancy. He's had many, many years of campaigning for causes that you would expect in the green progressive side of politics, and he's please welcome him here tonight.
Thank you, Sebastian, and all my good friends in the rainbow community. Yes, I'm the Greens candidate. Just a little bit about myself. I came from the country, Albury-Wodonga in fact. I have had a long experience with dealing with bureaucracy. First of all, the Albury-Wodonga Development Corporation, when it acquired the family property on the outskirts of Albury, and I really do understand what the people who are subjected to the threat of WestConnects and compulsory acquisitions are likely to go through. I ran a business in Wodonga for a number of years after that, and also a farm at Corowa. I fell into a rather deep rift with a major bank. I fought for 11 years. I came out the other end intact, bought property in Sydney, and been here ever since. I feel very much part of this community, especially this wonderful rainbow community, and all my brothers and sisters and all those binary non-conforming people whom I've met over the years. I find you to be really my truest friends. Now, I've got 3 questions in front of me, which I'll deal with first, and I think then I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the Greens. But do the Greens support compulsory voting for businesses? No, we don't. It's quite simple. The Greens policy on business voting is that it's one person, one value as it comes off the Australian electoral roll. Although, when I say that, the Greens have always taken the view, and it is a libertarian view, that if a business owner or a property owner wants to register to vote, they should be free to do so. but the threat of a $2,200 fine if you do not register and vote, or even to go through the paperwork as I had to register my business, is a complete impost on a business, and it should not exist. I truly believe that on the libertarian principle that brings me here to speak to you tonight as a member of the Rainbow community, we value our personal rights. And as a small business person, I really also value those personal rights. I know I've got to pay taxes, I know I've got to support other people in the community, and I know the people that I should be supporting are the people who are the least privileged in the community. That's what makes me a Green. Now, as far as Oxford Street goes, yes, Christine, I do support your proposal for a museum. I think that we need to respect the angst and the toil that our forebears went through to deliver the freedoms that Clover also alluded to, and thank you so much for the work that you did in Parliament on that. But it's not over. And as Christine said, yes, the marriage equality issue is looming up in front of us, and it should not be an expensive plebiscite. We shouldn't be spending $160 million and reported to be a $500 million loss of GDP when it's taken into account all the disruption that will occur on that day. We know how members of Parliament are aligning at the moment. We know that most people will pass this, and why the 2004 fiddle with the Marriage Act can't be just changed by a couple of words to insert any adult human being is beyond me. It is such a simple thing to resolve. Truly, freedom is all about giving us that libertarian right to live our identity. I cherish that. So let's fix that fast. Now, as for the remainder of Oxford Street, yes, we do need to revitalise it. That's essential. Now, just recently I was honoured to speak at a forum put on by the Chamber of Commerce over at Pyrmont, Ultimo and Glebe, and they brought to the attention of the Greens the prospect of these business improvement districts. Newcastle are doing this, they're doing it well. I took this to my party, who make their decisions by consensus, and at a meeting, by consensus, the people at that meeting supported that concept. So in the City of Sydney now, the Greens support the idea of business improvement districts. This is something that if the business community engages in it, the council will collect a levy, give it back to you so that you can engage with the residents around you and your community in general and improve your district and have the power and the authority and the desire to deliver back for yourselves and for your community. Isn't that what we're here for? That's what we should be aiming to do. Cut bureaucracy and deliver for the people. And that definitely includes the small business community. I think that's my 5-minute bell. So what would we do? What will I do on council? I will work. If all of us get elected on council, my promise to the community is I will work with all these wonderful people and we will deliver for the people of Sydney. That's my promise.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Next up is Linda Scott. Linda's running as mayoral candidate for the Labor Party. She's a researcher at Sydney University and has been a councillor since 2012. Her team includes LGBTI community icon Ian Roberts, who we've already heard about this evening. Please welcome Linda.
Thanks very much. I also would like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people on whose land we are tonight and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I want to thank Mark and the organisation and also Sebastian and Landis and Rogers for having us here. It is hard not to see Ian Roberts, and the problem is that, excuse me, every time Ian and I have to get photographed together, poor old Ian has to get down on his knees to approach anywhere like the height that I am. And having played football for so many years, that is quite a painful experience for him. So I just want to pay respect to Ian, my great gratitude for him for running for our Labor team and running for council, but also for painfully having to just bend down every time he gets photographed with me. Friends, Many of you may know a little bit about me, and that of course I'm a strong supporter of equality, like Labor is so well known for. But I just wanted to start off with a quick story. When I was 16, I lived in the United States for a year, and it was during the time when a whole lot of ballot measures were going through different states in the US, where they were looking to put plebiscites to the community about whether or not certain issues, if they got 10,000 names on a signature, would be entrenched into law. So in the state that I lived in, Oregon, in the year that I lived there, there was a ballot measure looking to entrench discrimination into state law, whereby if you were a man and you had a photo of a man on your desk, you, for example, it would be legal to sack you for being suspected to be gay. And there was also ballot measures up for election where they were removing literature from public libraries that had any reference to being gay or lesbian, and a whole lot of other incredibly discriminatory measures. I have to say, as a young person, it was quite astonishing for me to witness what was really my first hate campaign. The ads on television were extraordinary. I don't need to tell you what they contained. I'm sure you've all seen examples. But it was, for a young person like myself, an incredibly eye-opening experience into how terrible a political campaign can be when it is based and fueled on hate. That really politicised me, that experience, because frankly I'd grown up in a very tolerant family. My younger sister was born with a disability, and my family, you know, wonderful group of people who taught me to be tolerant and accepting, and it was my first real experience of the horror and the hate that we see in these kinds of awful and divisive campaigns. I came back from the United States a committed activist for equality, and haven't really stopped in that cause ever since. I want to talk now, though, a little bit, of course, about the City of Sydney and about Labor's vision for our future. We acknowledge that for the last 12 years there's been a lot of things that the Lord Mayor's done that we agree with, but we do have some concerns going forward about the fact that we're trying to put forward a positive vision for the future of the City of Sydney, and that is not present across the spectrum. Over the last 12 years, though, the City of Melbourne's economy has grown by 76%, more than double the City of Sydney. Our housing costs in Sydney continue to soar. Today, the median house price is 5 times what it was. In 1980, the median house price was 2.5 times the annual household income. In the City of Sydney, though, it's 12.5 times. We've got a real housing affordability crisis. The city's latest winter street count of homelessness is its worst since counting began. What we want to do is use council funds to address this issue. The City of Sydney was the first government that invested in public and affordable housing. The city has good targets, but we believe they've not been acted on, and we want to do more about that. New South Wales Labor, just when it comes to the business vote, we don't support the non-residential role. We think it's $12 million that is not well spent, and it shouldn't be compulsory for businesses to get on the roll. I was surprised to hear the Lord Mayor support it tonight. She's said in an earlier forum in Alexandria she didn't support it, and we had always understood that we were united on that. But New South Wales Labor has committed that if we're elected at the next state election that we will roll back this law. We don't think it's the right thing. And frankly, it's insulting to say that we wouldn't work with businesses, we wouldn't listen to businesses if they didn't have a vote. We think that it's a ridiculous concept to divide the residential community and the business community. We should make Sydney and the city a great place for everybody, and would be committed to working with everybody, no matter whether they vote for or against Labor, no matter whether they have a vote or not. Labor also supports the building and funding of an LGBTI museum at Taylor Square. We think the T2 building should be committed to that and should be funded by council. As far as I know, we're the only team to do so. Taylor Square is not the only part of the gay community, but it is a very important part of our city. It tells the stories of our past. It should hold those memories and talk to the communities of the future about those stories, and we think T2 as a museum is the best way to do that. We would also, though, look at distributing rainbow family kits across the city. My son goes to Newtown Primary. There's a whole lot of wonderful rainbow families there that still experience daily discrimination, and we think there's all sorts of things that we can do to support those families and to support those children in particular in making sure that there's no discrimination happening and that all our teachers and public service and community organisations are best educated about how to provide the best services and care and support for those families. And primarily, Labor will really end the blame game. We are sick of the endless blaming of other levels of government for problems that are happening in the city, and so whatever stripe, we want to work with all levels of government to put people first for the City of Sydney's future. So I ask for your support to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Next up is Angela Vithoulkas. Angela was elected to council in 2012 and has established the Sydney Matters independent team. She owns and runs a small business in the city, and I'd like you to welcome her tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I thank you very much for the invitation and acknowledge the SGLBA and of course our host this evening and all of you for taking the time to come out. Many of you have been to a couple of the forums now and seen us all speak many times, and it takes quite an effort for all of you to come as well. And to my team that's here this evening, thank you. We were asked to prepare some thoughts for tonight on several issues, and I'm going to talk about those. As far as some points about myself, I'm a resident of the City of Sydney, I'm a business owner, I'm a tenant, and I'm also a landlord. So I understand what all the spectrums are about. Could I ask you for a moment to consider an example? If every single business in the city left, what would there be? And then consider if every single resident left, what would there be? It's together that we survive. It's together that we thrive. To divide this community is wrong, because our local businesses need our local residents, and our local residents love our local businesses, and they should be equally represented. While the businesses in the City of Sydney have always had the right to vote, the amended business voting franchise, though far from perfect, is definitely a step in the right direction. To suggest it's an attempt to hand control of this city to the big end of town is not evidence-based. All I ask people to do is reserve judgment until after the election and observe Melbourne's progress, who have had the same franchise for the past 10 years. It was very difficult to vote in previous years as a business owner. There were several forms to fill out, if you could work out which one, and you only had a couple of weeks to organise yourself to fill out those forms and submit them. Now, 4 years later, after a great big battle and millions of dollars, not a lot changed. I'd like to see further change. I'd like to see the process streamlined and simplified. I'd like to see it done online. I'd like to see the 9 or 10 forms eliminated and brought down to maybe 1 or 2. And I'd like to see the misconception that there are 2 votes for each business also put to rest. It's 1 vote per person. I have a business in the city and I'm a resident. I don't get 2 votes. I get 1. That's the way it is for every single person that lives in Australia, and that's the way it should be. I've always supported 1 vote per person. While much of the property north of Martin Place is owned by institutional owners, it's occupied and leased by small and medium enterprises who are now able to vote freely. That they should spend their waking hours here, invest their capital, hearts and souls, pay nearly 80% of the cost of running Town Hall, and be treated as subjects in an absolute monarchy and not citizens in a democracy is entirely counterproductive. In respect of Oxford Street, we paid particular attention to it as it's been a feature of the last state campaign, and quite rightly this one. All manner of solutions have been proposed. None so far have worked. We say that the starting point is the removal of local traffic, at about 64,000 cars a day. This is the absolute first necessary step to giving it back to the residents and to reinvent itself. The traffic must come off Oxford Street. That's what it deserves, and I make no apologies about our solution. It's bold and audacious, or as it's been described in the Herald, bodacious. If someone has something realistic and better than the one I have advanced, then I'm all ears. And we've got the dialogue going on this subject, and that's part of my job. As far as the LGBTI community is concerned, my starting point is that I'm not going to Town Hall to represent government to you. I am going to represent you to government, and that's the best starting point I can do. It has long been our view and my view of our team. Our consultation process has not been our finest hour at Town Hall, and my plan to make council easier to deal with is a definite and absolute priority. Sydney Matters is a plan to make Sydney smarter, safer and easy to deal with for both the residents and the business owners of this city. We have a plan for business and economic growth that applies the best thinking in technology enablement to reposition Sydney as a smart city, a city that works efficiently and effectively for all our stakeholders. Our policies will support the whole community, including our late night economy policy, our residents task force that we've put forward, our policy for seniors, and our plan for parks and recreation, and so much more. What the chamber will look like come September the 10th is a matter for voters. Should I find myself in a chamber where no one group has monopoly on exercising the levers of power, I view that as a satisfactory position. As in life, no one should have a monopoly on wisdom. A diversity of opinion is to be expected in politics, as in every other aspect of our life. Our job in these circumstances is to distill the collective views of our experience and hopefully produce the right ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. Thank you, Angela. Now we're swapping over to our Q&A section of the event. So we will have the opportunity here for people in the room and people online to ask questions that they'd like to submit to the candidates. In general, just a comment to the candidates, if you could keep your responses brief, because we would like each of the candidates, if it's relevant, to answer from their perspective, so perhaps no more than a minute. Just to kick things off, I have a question that was submitted to me earlier by a community organisation leader, and I just thought I'd start with everyone addressing this. So for those of you who don't know, Council support local community groups and initiatives using several different grant funding programs, and these are very formalised programs that fall into very specific categories. These grants are typically structured as one-off applications. You apply and you succeed or you don't, and then if you want to go again, you apply again at a later time. So an example of one for our community that I noticed was passed recently by a council meeting was an initiative for the Rainbow Families. I believe that's a very recent one. So to all of the candidates, what is your policy position for community grants? Should they be one-off grants or should there be more longer-term funding initiatives? Thank you.
I might start off. When I became mayor, I inherited a policy where all the decisions about grants were made over the mayor's desk. It seemed very much like grace and favour. So we set up a process, and we have a team at the city, and we have various categories, and we have a team at the city, and they go through each of those on merits. And then if you don't receive a grant on that first round, you're still on the list and you can be reconsidered again. So it's a way of us supporting the community in doing a whole range of really worthwhile things. And I think that's really important. And we'll do want to continue to do that process in that way.
Yeah, look, I would agree that one-off grants the way to go for community groups generally. You make a submission, it gets assessed, and the Lord Mayor's correct. It's a fairly stringent process, as it should be, and community groups are required to meet KPIs to ensure that the money that they've been granted, that is after all owned by the ratepayers, has been put to good use. But also there is capacity, certainly for some ongoing funding. the model that I've suggested for the LGBTI Museum and Community Space on Oxford Street would require a commitment of seed funding for at least a couple of years anyway, ongoing seed funding, because there is no museum in the world that hasn't got up without some kind of public funding, and that's what it will take to get an LGBTI museum up in the Oxford Street precinct. So that would require a commitment of funding over a couple of years, and then hopefully that cultural institution would find its feet and become self-funding over the ensuing years after that. So there's room for both.
Okay, Lindsay?
Green's position on this is that one-off grants are fine, but there is always a but in these questions. That there are a lot of community groups out there, especially in the transgender community, which my partner is a member of. They're disadvantaged, and there is a real lack of funding in that community. Now, I would like to see the city start to look at the groups that are most disadvantaged, where, yes, it can be a one-off grant by all means, but the promise of further funding would be extremely important to those groups, because what we're finding in this particular group of our rainbow community is that there's more and more kids coming out and identifying as transgender or gender non-binary, which is something that's, the way it's being described. And these kids need to be given an opportunity to access information. Their families need to access that information. And as I say, the number that are coming out is increasing rapidly. And it's not because in the past they didn't exist. It's because families and these children now feel comfortable to come out. And on that particular point, I'll just make a comment on the Safe Schools program. And I know I'm slightly off point on this. To knock the Safe Schools program out the way it was really, really harmful. And I'd like to see the city put some sort of grant in place there to help these children so that they don't have to go through what many of us have to go through.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Look, I support the city having a grants program that's independent from political judgment, and I don't think there's any kind of debate about that. What I do think is that moving forward, it would be better to have a better, split between the grants that are for new and innovative projects and others that really require recurrent funding. The city's current proposal has really been to work with grants, organisations that have not received grants, and encourage new organisations constantly to receive grants. So I think there's got to be a grant stream for that kind of process, but at the same time, I think a lot of our very long established, very high functioning, great community organisations, great services are then missing out on some of that recurrent funding when we know that they do a great job. They've got runs on the board, and it's very difficult for them to continue to offer the services that they do or expand because they just don't fit into the eligibility of the grant funding categories of the city. So I think moving forward, a better mix between new ideas and recurrent funding for those high performers is a better way to structure the city's grant programs.
Thank you. Angela?
I'm not happy with the grants process. I think it's onerous for a lot of the community groups. I think it takes them a lot of time and a lot of effort from a lot of their volunteers to get through the red tape and the paperwork that the city induces on them. They're not professional organisations. Most of them don't pay anyone involved, and quite often when they fall short of getting a grant, it's because they haven't ticked all the boxes correctly. And while I do support that it should be at arm's length, I think the process of where we evaluate the grants process and the people who assist the people applying for the grant process should be very separate. We have a lot of skills at the city, we have a lot of great people, and there are some amazing community organisations out there who are doing lots of good work. But their specialty is not filling out forms. Their specialty is helping their communities in those areas that they understand and identify need support. So where the city is letting down these community groups is in the red tape and the bureaucracy. We need to get out of their way and let them do the work that they need to do and make it much easier for them to deal with us.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? I can see some hands behind, perhaps Michael.
We're not letting go of the microphone.
Yes,
John Bellamy, Sydney Light Rail Action Group. Candidates, just wanted to ask with regard to the CBD and Southeast Light Rail project, given that 40 to 50 Anzac memorial trees are still under threat along the busway from the poles and wires of the light rail, given that it's now been revealed that there'll be a 60% reduction in public transport capacity into the city, and given that the light rail will cause massive congestion for the traffic and the economy of Sydney, the question is, do you still support continuing the light rail project and completing it?
I take it that's for everyone.
Yes, for everybody.
Clover, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I won't start on everyone.
No, that's fine.
I'll start the other end this time. I definitely have a view on that.
Okay. Well, perhaps, Lindsay, what are your thoughts on this?
The destruction of those trees is appalling. This project, the way, and I'm making a personal comment here, not a party comment, so I want to make that clear. To lose those trees of that age along Anzac Parade was vandalism at its worst.
Yep.
Now, that should not have happened. What's happened is typical of the way we do things in Sydney when it comes to transportation design. The Greens' position on this is we want to bring, now I know we've got to work with all levels of government on this, but the city can take leadership on this particular issue. And I'll just make the point that when Philip founded this colony, he had absolutely no idea where it was going. About the next 4 governors had even less idea where it was going, and then we got a bloke called Macquarie who had a bit of vision. Now, the damage was done because it was 2 horses each way. And then 100 years after Macquarie, we got Bradfield, who had a bit of vision. And he worked with experts in the field as the Director of Public Works, and he did some great things for this city. He envisaged that it was going to grow to something like New York at the time. It's now exceeded it. What we need to do in Sydney now is take a leadership position and bring in the best engineers we can find, the best town planners we can find. If they're not in Australia, we bring them from elsewhere in the world and we say, this is the hodgepodge that we've got. And what we have to do is cease using band-aids. We need to design a transportation system that will deliver into the 21st century and beyond. And we need the best people on the ground to make that delivery. And that's what's good for business, it's good for residents, it's good for the environment. And the Greens' position is that if you cannot deliver on the environment and the ecology, the economy, and the social sustainability index, at the end of the day, you will end up with nothing but a slum that will have decreasing property values, no quality of life for the people.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think we've well and truly covered the...
I'm happy to go next on this one.
Sure, Christine.
Look, nobody likes the loss of trees under any circumstances, particularly those beautiful figs. But the reality is that the redesign, as I understand it, the light rail has been redesigned to reduce the reduction or the loss of trees by 740, something like that. And the reality is that 1,800 trees are going to be planted to replace, albeit they won't be as large as the trees, some of the trees that have been lost, but 1,800 new trees are going to be planted to replace the ones that have been lost, to more than replace the ones that have been lost. And let's be quite clear here. The Lord Mayor has signed up to this. She has agreed to the plan.
I can add some place.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was part of the council that signed up to it as well. So it has been agreed. There is a contract and it's been agreed. But what the light rail will deliver is long-term transport infrastructure that this city needs. It will take more than 200 buses off the streets of the CBD, out off the streets of the southeast, Randwick, and into the city. More than 200 buses coming off the streets. We will have a much more beautiful central spine, north-south spine in the city, which will be pedestrianised between Hunter and Bathurst Street, which will become a magnificent world-leading retail sector, retail precinct. So there is long-term, there is a long-term gain, yes, short-term pain, but for a long-term gain.
Thank you. Perhaps you'd like to comment?
Yeah, so look, the city's contributed $220 million to the light rail. That was a unanimous decision through our council. I think for that money, we could have demanded better design and much better planning for the project. I think the trees going down are unnecessary and it just could have been avoided with better planning. I make the same comment, I have to say, about the delays we're now going to see with construction going over Christmas, which will be devastating for the businesses and the CBD of George Street. So I think the city could have demanded much more in return for our $220 million investment in this, and I think it was mishandled from the beginning. The residents in Surrey Hills who found out that their entire apartment block was going to be knocked down by reading about it in the newspaper, when they rang the minister's office, and when I rang the minister's office, the minister didn't respond for weeks, but responded the next day when the newspaper rang them up about it. Heather from the Central, you know, it was the local newspaper who got in touch, and she could respond to them within 24 hours, but not the residents who were losing their home. You know, that doesn't say we shouldn't have a public transport system, but it's fundamentally wrong and rude to deal with people and businesses in this way.
Thank you. Angela, briefly, please.
I may present a different view on light rail because I live it every day at the moment, and I've attended every single meeting, and the process of how this was executed and brought down is shameful. There was no consultation, there's been no discussion. I had a phone call, a brief 30-second phone call to tell me that Christmas was going to be destroyed again. There was no respect or significance paid, much in the same way as they ripped out the trees and refused to conceal the wires around Devonshire Street and other parts of the plan. Much of this plan has gone up without the thought for the long distance of the design. I'm sure many of you here have renovated or built a home. You are unlikely to turn up with a bunch of tiles and some cement and start renovating. You would generally, I hope, work from plans. This wasn't the case. Contracts were signed without designs put forward. Contracts were signed without any consultation. Contracts were signed without everybody knowing what was going to happen. So as far as that process goes, it certainly wasn't easy to deal with, and I didn't support it. I support a good outcome, but the casualties and the bodies that are going to be left along the way, I don't think that's the right way to do business.
Thank you. Ms. Clover?
Yes, I strongly support light rail, the principle of light rail, and I strongly support addressing congestion. It's currently costing $5 billion a year in our city currently. It'll be $8 billion by 2020 if it's business as usual. And have long supported it, and supported Gladys Berejiklian in taking on the cabinet and getting light rail up. It is a design and construct program. And the city has contributed. We've contributed $220 million, but the city can't pay for transport under the Local Government Act. We are contributing that money to the public domain. So our role is to create a very beautiful George Street and to ensure that the standards of public domain that we do in the city are met in George Street and in Devonshire Street, and we are working very hard to try and minimise impact on Moore Park and get the best possible outcome. We're really trying to work on the outcome. I agree with some of the other speakers that I don't think the process has been the best it could have been. And I'm in constant contact with, as is the city, with the Department of Transport and the Minister's Office over this. I think there is a bit of an obsession with meeting the timeline, and I believe with a project that you have to get it right rather than finish it before an election. And you know, so there'll be a delay. I think it's really, really important. This is an incredibly important project for the global city. You know how bad the congestion in the city was. You know how bad the gridlock was. And yet this project is going to remove that congestion. We'll have a beautifully designed boulevard in George Street, and hopefully a an attractive outcome in Devonshire Street. The city's working very hard to ensure that happens, and I hope we minimise the impact on Moore Park. So I think it is a work in progress, and I think lessons hopefully have been learned as a result, and I really think the government needs to focus on the outcome, that we get the best possible outcome. I don't believe it should be 67 metres long. Most other light rails around the world are 37 metres, and I think that's an issue, and I think it's something the government will have to consider down the track, and I've said that to them.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Vicky Harding from Inner City Legal Centre. I'm the Centre Director there. Inner City Legal Centre has been in the City of Sydney area for 35 years, and we provide free specialist advice and legal support for the LGBTIQ community. And I confirm that there is a lot of need in the trans community at the moment, and we are seeing lots of families and assisting them through the family court application process for kids under 18 who want to transition. So, for example, in the last two weeks, we've had 5 phone calls initiating that process, and we're currently supporting 9 families who are going through the family court process. So we're really grateful because the city does provide us with free accommodation in King's Cross and has for many, many years. But what we're facing this next financial year is a very substantial funding cut from the federal government. So we're looking to have our funding cut by about 1/5 of what we get at the moment, which means we can't continue to support the clients that we support. So what I'd like to know is how you might be able to support Inner City Legal Centre, because we're a centre within your catchment area and we share clients and residents.
Thank you. Perhaps Linda, would you be interested?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely dreadful, the cuts that have been made to communities, legal centres right across the city. I'm sure you know federal Labor committed $1.8 million over 3 years to fund inner city community legal centres. Of course, I'm disappointed that we weren't elected and so couldn't restore so much of that important funding for the work that you do. Your work is vital. I've previously moved that the city fund Redfern Legal Centre to support our public housing tenants in Waterloo, particularly through this incredibly difficult transition process where they're all being moved out of their homes and out of the inner city. And I think, you know, I would welcome a conversation about the city doing what we can to support the inner city legal centres. They're vital, and they're obviously offering very important services that people cannot get elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you. Christine, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, the ICLC does provide an essential service, which council has the capacity to support. The services raise the possibility of using T2 as a legal hub as opposed to a bike hub, which was the previous plan for it, which I certainly opposed very strongly. But we do have the capacity to give to provide the kind of office space that you need to have to support the service to continue to do the very great and necessary work that it does do.
Thank you. Clover, perhaps?
Yes, I'm a strong supporter of Inner City Legal Aid and have worked with you for many years, as I have with Redfern Legal Centre. And I understand you're talking with our staff, and we're looking for solutions to give you that support. And that one of the things that you could do is amalgamate some of the other centres with you, and we could provide expanded accommodation, which I'm sure we would want to do, and keep your work going. It's absolutely vital, and I think it's terrible that the federal government is cutting these absolutely essential services to the inner city community.
Thank you. Lindsay, would you like to comment on this?
I think I said a lot of it before,
yes.
But I wonder how much support you would get with $12 million, which has been invested in a compulsory voting for businesses. What we need to very carefully look at is how we allocate the resources, and the Greens would strongly support the allocation of that resource. This is critical. Like there's 3 areas where society needs to invest heavily. One is in healthcare, education, particularly early childhood education, and we're sort of leading into that here. And of course the other one is access to justice. And I've had 11 years of experience in that myself. You don't get access to justice without money. If you don't have ability and you don't have money, you will die on the scrap heap. Now, the service you're providing is absolutely essential to that community. Absolutely essential, and the city must do all it can to support you. Otherwise, we're going to lose so many valuable little kids.
Thank you very much. Angela, would you like to comment?
I think it's unfortunate when we keep saying that it's either a choice of supporting the business community or other communities. I think it is very obvious to me that council has the ability and the funds to support those communities who unfortunately keep getting guillotined with their funding. And we have many different options of doing that. It can be value in kind, or it can be with dollar funding. So I think rather than just part of the process of making it easier to deal with is that we should speed up these processes for community organisations who are in need, who need to plan, who need to assist people who are already in a process of being assisted, making sure that you keep having your staff employed and working. All of these things take time, and for you this is important, and for us to kind of be dragging the chain, that's wrong. So speeding up the process so you have surety should be a number one priority. We have the funding for it. We don't need to sacrifice other groups at the expense of that.
Thank you very much. I have a question, I think, that's coming from online.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Right, we'll get some questions from Facebook throughout the evening, and I'll just pick random ones. So there's a question here from Patrick Lloyd to Christine. What steps have you taken to investigate changes to the lockout laws? What ministers have you written to, and what has their response been? What's your plan for getting the support of your own party, and why do you think being the Lord Mayor would make them more likely to make changes?
All in less than a minute, hopefully.
It's pretty easy. I've sat in the room with the Premier and asked him to wind these laws back. Exactly that. You know, it's hurting people that it shouldn't be hurting. It's had an impact on small businesses across the lockout area, and I actually get into the room with the Premier and can make representations to him on that. But you know, we are waiting for the results of the Callan report, and that will, I'm sure, you know, that will inform the government's response. But it won't be for any lack of my trying, because you know, it has had a very severe knock-on effect to the economy, the daytime as well as the late night economy in part of the world particularly that's very important to me, Oxford Street, because I live there and you know, I do business there, and I go and go out there as well. So, but I have directly lobbied the Premier face to face, and I will continue to do so.
In the interest of fairness, I think, Clover, perhaps you might want to talk about what you've done.
Yes, the city never supported the draconian action that Barry O'Farrell took, and before that he took that action, the city had over a number of years developed a policy which we called Open Sydney, and we did really comprehensive consultation on this. We talked to residents, we went at 2 a.m. and talked to people going to the clubs. It was really comprehensive. And we ended up with a suite of proposals that Judge Calhoun is now considering, and which I think will be part of what the government will hopefully do as a result of this process. So we talked about periodic licensing. The fact that venues had lifetime licenses meant there was no leverage to deal with rogue venues. The fact that there was inadequate public transport to get people home. There was an inadequate way of assessing whether an area had reached saturation or having a cumulative impact, and that's what was happening in an area like King's Cross, where the numbers of people going to that area could not be accommodated in the venues that were available. So these are all things that we had raised with the Premier, successive Premiers actually, and it fell on deaf ears, because I think both the major parties were held were beholden to the hotel industry, the AHA, because they were big donors to the parties. And so, you know, even when I put my small bars bill to the New South Wales Parliament, both the major parties opposed it, first of all, until there was a strong community campaign, and that reform was included into the liquor reforms. So it fell on deaf ears until we had that death of Thomas Kelly, and Barry O'Farrell stepped in and introduced those draconian laws, which have had a really serious impact. The nighttime economy in our area is worth 3.5 billion. 31,000 jobs are involved, but it's also the social implications. You know, the majority of people wanted to go out, they wanted to go out and socialise, and they wanted to go out and listen to live music.
Yeah.
And they simply have not been able to, and they're very angry. And it has had a real impact on the live music industry. We really want to see that changed.
Thank you very much, Clover. I think Angela also has some serious policies in this area.
For me, it's a lot about choice. I mean, we hear that discussed a lot, and freedoms. I don't want to be told what time I should come and go. I want to have that freedom, just like I grew up and I could go out at any time that I wanted. Why can't I have that? I'm an adult, supposedly, and I can make these decisions. We're being robbed of choices. We're being robbed of freedom. They seem to be able to dish out big fat laws whenever they feel like it to affect our lives without asking first. It's impacted the nighttime economy, it's impacted the daytime economy, and it's impacted lives. And now they're standing back to have a review. Here's the review. We'd like our lives back, please, and our choices.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Labor introduced the small buzz reforms that successfully made it through the Parliament and have made such a big difference to our city's nightlife. There are clearly problems with the lockout laws as they stand. One side of Piedmont Bridge Road in, the other side out. Big problems in other areas of the city where these artificial boundaries apply, and of course the casino left conveniently out. So it's very clear that there needs to be reform in this area. I think the lockout laws have gone too far, and so I don't think there's much disagreement on this panel about the fact that they need to be wound back so that the city can regain a safe but active nightlife going forward.
Thank you. Lindsay, do you want to add any more?
The Greens' position on this was clear at the very beginning. We predicted that this was going to have a huge social impact. It was going to knock around severely small business. We represented that position. We saw this issue as probably a health issue. We felt that controlling the violence could be controlled two ways. It would fall on the big venue operators who were allowing this to happen, and a lot of the people who were causing the problems we saw as having a mental health issue, and we were trying to reach out to the power brokers in the state government to take on board that we needed more investment in mental health to try and do something about this, rather than take a sledgehammer to a peanut and kill everything. So our position was clear at the beginning, and I might say that we lost a bit of political skin over this too, and there's more than one person up here whose party, you know, is represented on this panel tonight that attacked the Greens' position at the time. And I can proudly say we got it right.
Thank you very much for that. I can see another hand up the back. Perhaps if Michael can go up the back.
My question's about the proposal for a museum in the T2 building,
Sure.
which some of the candidates have addressed generally, but I would like specifics. One, will you explicitly commit to keeping the T2 building in public hands? Two, given much of the community's time, energy, and particularly if a plebiscite goes ahead, cash will be going to the cause of marriage equality, would the U contribute money to the startup and recurrent costs of running an LGBTI museum?
So can we please have very brief answers? Yes.
Sure. I was supportive from the very beginning of the T2 building being a museum and being funded from council. I was very much against it being a bike hub. I didn't think that was very productive. I didn't like the excuses that I got from council that the community wasn't interested in just picking up the project and running with it. Who is equipped and funded to run a museum? Certainly the city has resources to be able to assist with that concept and developing it and helping the community get set up. I don't think we should keep putting responsibilities back when there are really good ideas on the table. And I was also very much against the proposal that was dropped on us like a bomb at council that, oh, perhaps we should just get rid of the building now because it hasn't all worked out. That is not how you do business at the city, and it's especially not how it works by stealth in how we're going to control our communities and our landmarks.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
So the answer is yes, yes and yes. I was the only councillor to vote against the sale of the T2 building when it came forward to council. We've made the commitment openly. We think it should be a museum. We think it should be primarily funded by council, and there should be recurrent funding to make sure that it is able to continue and stay open as a museum.
Thank you, Linda. Lindsay?
That's yes, yes and yes, and we would like to see the management of the museum completely under the control of members of the Rainbow community under some sort of trust structure, initially perhaps funded by council, but on an ongoing basis, probably stand alone in time, and that's what we would hope to see, and that's our position on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, of course. I mean, T2 is an iconic building in an iconic location. It's the perfect place to have an LGBTI museum. I've pushed for since 2012 for council to commit funding to establishing the museum and community space, exhibition space. So absolutely.
Look, the T2 building was bought by council after we were lobbied very hard by the community because the venue was a very, very bloody and very dangerous place. And some of you may remember it. And we were lobbied very hard to introduce a daytime activity there. This will take a tiny bit of time, it's a little bit of history. And at this time we'd introduced our bike network, and we were doing the bike network up Burke Street, and it was thought it would be very good to have a bike-related facility there as a daytime use to quieten and civilise that area. Because the bike network and cycling has been so successful, a number of other shops have already carried out that work, so we don't see that use as being applicable, and nor did we think it was a good investment of public money now, given that there are these other activities happening in the area, and you know where the bike cafes are. We also had gone out for expressions of interest and asked if there was interest for a museum, and there wasn't. And so we'd also done the work to restore the building, and we know it will cost $12 million. So given there was not interest in the museum, we'd had a pop-up museum in Oxford Street run by Mardi Gras, and we offered that to Mardi Gras on a permanent basis, and they didn't want to do it. So it seemed that the best thing and the most responsible thing for council to do, given it's a public organisation responsible for public monies and a huge amount of work to do right across the city, that it was best finally to sell the building, and that's where we're at the moment. The group promoting the museum now came to see me quite recently, together with a member of the Australian Workers' Union, which I thought was odd because I've been working with you for 30 years and I haven't had the Australian Workers' Union lobby me about a project before with the gay and lesbian community. So they said they had a submission, they had a petition on the proposal, and I accepted that and I presented to council at last meeting, and I've also deferred that sale until after the election. I offered them an inspection, this group, an inspection of T2 to see if it would be work as a museum. I asked them, did they have a proposal for a museum? They didn't have a proposal. They can't do the inspection till after the election. And I just feel slightly uncomfortable that I'm being set up a bit here. But as I said to you when I addressed you earlier, I support the idea of it, but I think it should be a community initiative with community support, and that simply hasn't happened. And it was discussed at the last election, it's being discussed now, and you know, if there is a groundswell of support, people volunteers who are interested in being involved in it, who want to run it. This group hadn't talked to the Pride group, the History group, and so it seemed to be a project being plucked for the election. If it's not, and you know I have a long record of working with you and supporting you in what you want to do, we can reconsider it. But you know, I think it's really, really important, as I said earlier, that it's not something that council runs. It's something that really needs to have strong grassroots support from the community to be involved in it and to be part of it. It doesn't have to be T2, it can be one of our properties in Oxford Street, which and there is the opportunity to revisit those activities there too. So That's
very much.
not a yes, yes, yes. That's considering this in a really responsible way as a responsible authority.
Thank you very much. I can see someone has a hand up right at the back, if you would like that.
Hi, thanks all for coming. My name's Stefan. I'm from the Darlinghurst Business Partnership in up around Oxford Street. So the changes in King's Cross since the introduction of the lockout laws have been swift and stark. Development money has swept through and the culture has shifted dramatically. This kind of gentrification follows an inexorable pattern. Creative individuals move into poor or rundown areas and make those areas vibrant, and then money moves in seeking that and pushes those creatives out. It is clear, especially with the money being asked for the Columbian Hotel, that development activity occurring in King's Cross will come to Oxford Street shortly. If, however, it is managed creatively and effectively, this need not spell the end of the City of Sydney's last unofficial arts, culture and entertainment precinct. City of Sydney Council, while not the ultimate planning authority, has significant powers under the local environment and development control plans, as well as the means with which to lobby the state government. Implementing changes such as mandatory levels of soundproofing and insulation for inner city developments, agent of change principles and inclusionary zoning to facilitate low rent creative space and affordable housing would go a long way to enhancing Oxford Street, Darlinghurst as a unique and vibrant creative living and working precinct on the city's doorstep. What will you candidates do to ensure that the lower Oxford Street district retains its LGBTI creative, alternative and independent culture in the face of future development?
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps Linda, if you'd like to start.
Stefan, you've clearly put a lot of effort and thought into that question, and I really applaud you for it. And I know you run a great business in that area, and it's very important for you that we all get this right. I think there's a very good set of proposals there that the council could really look very closely at enacting. I think making sure, just to take one of the concrete examples, that the development around there is soundproofed in order to make sure that we can continue to have very loud music and performance spaces in that area is something that I completely welcome. We campaigned very heavily at the last local election. It's something I still very strongly support, to get some action on live music, because frankly it is infuriating that so many live music venues have shut down in the city, and Labor wants to bring them back. We had a live music task force, which the city did. There's a lot of great recommendations in there, and so many of them have not been implemented, including looking at how we can better ensure that buildings are soundproofed. So I welcome your question. I think it's great. I think there's a lot of good ideas in there that I'm very happy to look at, and would, I think, go a long way, I think, to making sure that this area comes back to life after what has been a really bad couple of years.
Thank you. Angela, would you like to comment further?
So when we face the prospect of losing or having lost our vibrancy, and that includes our live music, our different types of venues, because they're not all big beer barns, it's different venues serve different purposes. And there's talk about them going to industrial sites like out at Marrickville, which are off the beaten track. They don't have almost any transport access, etc., and they want to put them there because of the soundproofing, because they don't have to worry about residents' access or residents complaining. Part of the vibrancy of living in the city is that you live amongst the culture of everything. It's not meant to be a completely tranquil country life. It's meant to have all different aspects of the life, and sometimes it's a little bit noisy and sometimes it's not. And I'm very glad to hear a lot of the great comments that Stefan has made, and very glad that a lot of those comments were already included in our policy on the nighttime economy. And I think design and planning is of the utmost importance if we are going to keep what vibrancy we have, bring back the vibrancy that we've lost, but also make sure that the amenity of our people that live here is maintained, and that we can get lots of visitors coming, because we need that for all our local businesses.
Thank you.
Stefan, I think you might have been listening into a Greens meeting. That's exactly what we want to do, to reinvigorate the nightlife in the city. We'd also like to cut the red tape that is applied to small venues in gaining these music facilities, and we'd like council to do a lot more to assist small business people to get these facilities up and running. And sure, we recognise that there are residents nearby, and as always, it's the venue operator who carries the responsibility that the quiet enjoyment of those that are close by is not negatively impacted. That's the way business should operate. You know, it's a user-pay system.
Thank you very much. Christine, please.
Yes, Stefan, my response to that is that, the nightlife in Oxford Street is not dying because there are restrictions on the noise level or because of some kind of aspect of council's planning controls. It's dying because of lack of footfall, foot traffic, people going to the destination, people going there to shop, to eat, to have a drink, to hang around, to go to Palms or Stonewall or the Shift. That's why it's the numbers, sheer numbers of people are down, and that is having a flow-on impact to all those businesses, whether they operate in the day or the night. And the one thing that council can do that it has in its control is that property portfolio on the north side of Oxford Street that we've been talking about. And if we can get that under some decent management so that it has retail tenants, it has commercial tenants, and it is activated and buzzing and it becomes a destination for people to want to go to again, we will solve virtually all the problems of Oxford Street because it will become a thriving, prosperous precinct again.
Thank you. Clover.
Thank you. Oxford Street has been undergoing change. It was a very different place when I moved into my office in Oxford Street in 1988. And the introduction of the Clearway, which I wasn't consulted about as local member, nor was South City Council or Wallara Council consulted, has had a real effect, as has a Westfield at either end, as has online shopping. What I did in 2011, I moved a proposal that council set up the properties we own as creative spaces. And I'll just tell you what the result of that has been. We've had 170 cultural workers and creative entrepreneurs doing their work there, 140 artists in each year of the program, 66 micro businesses, 90% of which had not worked in professional premises before that. 1,900 artists and creatives have had their work showcased, and the creative tenants have spent $2.36 million on local goods and services, equating to approximately $47,000 per month. I think that's a very good use of our properties to make it available to entrepreneurs and startups in design, film, transmedia, visual arts, screenwriting and digital production. That's what we've been doing. And I'll just tell you about the future, just briefly. Future tenants current tenants are Handcrafted, 2515, Ultraviolet, Videopond, Just Us Magazine, Hub Artist Services, Belinda Mason Photography, and the Australian Centre of Photography. Future tenants will be Australian Fashion Chamber, Design Residency, Mitra Films, Egg Picnic. In Foley Street by the end of the year we'll have the Australian Centre of Photography, MITT Market, Studio Enti, Bermuda Black, The Door List and The Tribe. And Spunky Brews is also moving around there too. So I just think that is a very worthwhile thing that the city is doing to make our properties available for creatives and to really contribute to the cultural life of Oxford Street. In fact, you know, one of the owners in the Paddington part of Oxford Street have said they'd like us to take over the whole of Oxford Street because the Darlinghurst part of it is thriving much more than the Paddington part of it. I think Oxford Street's undergoing change, and I think the city is really making a great contribution to keep that creative and cultural aspect of Oxford Street there.
Thank you very much. On that topic, the City of Sydney has identified through strategic plans several clusters of different types of businesses scattered throughout the local government area. There's clusters for creative businesses, I believe, in Surrey Hills. There's startups and media and technology businesses in Pyrmont and Ultimo. There's education-related businesses in the universities. With that in mind, what should each of you be doing to promote the formation of new businesses in those types of clustered areas where there's an advantage or a network effect? What is it the council should be doing in your view? And Angela, if you wouldn't mind starting.
So I've been very fortunate to be the Deputy Chair of the Business, Economic and Development Committee for the last 2 years and part of the startup plan. There's a lot more work to be done, but those clusters, and generally startups love to collaborate, and the research shows very clearly from overseas that when they are clusters and those clusters are supported, that they prosper and they grow quite rapidly than they would if they were isolated. So what we can do as the city is obviously look at more accommodation to enable these clusters to grow and to assist in that type of funding and any other support structure to unite and collaborate the different types of clusters so they complement each other. You've got the fintech clusters You've got the creative clusters. Many businesses need to come together to form a great business. It's not just any one idea. And the whole aspect of collaboration for startups is actually the way to move forward. It's a unique way of doing business that is unlike government, and private enterprises really seize that, and the universities have as well. So I think public-private partnerships are really important to see these clusters, to be able to nurture them, watch them grow, and let them take care of their own business.
Thank you. Christine, do you have a...
Yeah, sure. I mean, the one thing that any entrepreneur or startup company that walks through my door asks for from council is affordable office space. Now, council has the expertise to source affordable office space. It has the expertise to manage it, and it has the financial resources to provide it. So that's what we should be looking at doing: funding affordable office space for startups and supporting them in real practical terms.
Clover, what is your view?
I agree with that. We worked with the startup community as we developed our tech startup plan, and the things that we were really asked for was to promote, to support with events, and we do that. We do both those things, and to help with accommodation. I think the most important thing we've done is our City of Villages work, because these industries are in our villages. 40% of all jobs in the metropolitan area are focused in our area, in the city, predominantly in our villages. And I think it's because we've created places where people want to live and work that we've seen this happening. And I think we have to keep that policy going. It's a really, really important one.
Thank you. Lindsay, would you like to...
Someone who comes from a research and development background, I absolutely agree with what Angela says, and it's hard to disagree with Christine and Clover on this point. Look, what we need to do is R&D. We then need access to venture capital, and we need to build synergism within that business community. I mentioned before these business improvement districts. I think it's a great concept, and I think that could be a good way forward with this, and I think the city could do a lot to actually help guarantee some of the venture capital that would be supported to bring these ideas into reality.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
Thanks. Look, it's the other part of my life, I work at a university. I think the city could have a big role to play in encouraging better collaboration between the people who are in our universities and in our clusters already, and making sure that their ideas can be supported to take up. I think the provision of affordable office space is a critical one, and making sure that that is provided throughout the city, not just in the CBD, some of it, but throughout the city, so that people can start up their businesses, particularly close to where they live, because that's where people want to work, is a great way that we can assist as a council. And I also think that looking to promote these kinds of businesses internationally is something the city can better do. We're not just in a competitive market in Australia, we're obviously in a very, very global market. We want to make sure that we're not losing all our great ideas and all our great companies overseas, and we have a big role to play, I think, as the City of Sydney, in making sure that we can do all we can to keep people here. I think the organisations also, and I know like this one, looking into establishing and having co-working spaces, that's very important. I encourage you all to do that, and it's a good way that the city can engage in that provision of affordable office space.
Thank you. I can see a question down the back.
Okay, this was the last question for the evening, because we did make a commitment to the audience and also to the panellists who are running around doing many things, that we would keep the event on time. So we'll have the last question.
I've been a member of the gay and lesbian community for probably 30 years. My collection of photographs documenting the community are in the City of Sydney Library and online for people to use. I'd like to just state how appalled I am that the Liberal candidate has said she'd give over those office spaces that are dedicated to gay and lesbian community centres, like Mardi Gras, like the Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby, and sell off those spaces that the community had, that the City of Sydney has for our community. I'm appalled at that suggestion.
I haven't suggested that.
Classic.
I have not suggested that.
Yeah, well, whatever you're suggesting, Christine, doesn't go down with the community, basically. I think what I'd like to hear is how long you've been involved with the community and what sort of things, as a member of the community, you have to offer the gays and lesbians and the business community.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a gay woman, so I've been a gay woman for 52 years, I suppose, so that makes me part of the community. But in terms of direct involvement, I'm a Sapphire Ambassador for Pride and Diversity, which is the lesbian and transgender women's division of Pride and Diversity. I do a lot of work with them in terms of mentoring and engaging with younger women in the workplace. I'm a member of the Surrey Hills LAC Community Consultation Group, which I attend regularly, which does a heck of a lot of great work with the LGBTI community with a broad range of stakeholders, and they are making an enormous contribution, working in consultation with the Surrey Hills Police, led so admirably by Tony Crandell. Of course, I'm a member of the LGBTI community. My partner and I are very active in terms of local volunteering work. I make whatever contribution I can, and I do my very best to be a very strong advocate for the rights of the LGBTI community, to stand up when I see wrong being done to our community, to make my voice heard, and to make whatever contribution I can to the debates that impact us, and that we need to have our voices heard in where we are not being heard.
Well,
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Could I make a correction? I said to you in the beginning that I supported business having the vote. That is my position, and at the last local government election, the city actually gave $250,000 to the Electoral Commission to promote business voting. What I am absolutely opposed to is the terrible legislation that went through the New South Wales Parliament, cobbled together by Edward Mandler, who's sitting over there, and the Shooters Party, and the Baird government adopted to give 2 votes to corporates and only 1 to residents. Can I also just add that often it's been presented as this has worked in Melbourne, so it can work in Sydney. The Melbourne situation is quite different from the Sydney situation, and at the time the legislation was going through the New South Wales Parliament, the Victorian government got Petro Georgiou, a former Liberal MP, to do a review of what was the Melbourne situation. And Petro Georgiou came down with a very strong recommendation that it should not continue, and corporate should only have 1 vote, and the Electoral Commissioner, not the council, should be establishing the register. That is not what the New South Wales Parliament put through, and I'm very opposed to the current situation. And when legislation goes through the Parliament, local government as a creature of the state has to implement that legislation. And we have had to spend $12 million implementing that cobbled together legislation, and I think that's a disgrace.
Thank you for that. And I think it's fair to say that there's a fair amount of agreement between the candidates on a lot of issues tonight. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed the opportunity to ask questions, and please feel free to come up to us and network at the end so that you can meet people in person. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Okay, thanks very much, Sebastian. Please give Sebastian a round of applause for moderating tonight. On behalf of the SGLBA team, thank you all once again for attending, and also thank you to the 40 or 50 so people we had joining us on Facebook. If anybody wants to continue conversation or questions, perhaps the candidates would like to log into the SGLBA Facebook page throughout the course of the coming days, and plenty of questions there for you as well. We couldn't get to all of them, I'm sorry about that. Thank you also again to Landra and Rogers, and also to our speakers this evening. So please give them a round of applause. We appreciate your time, and wish you all and your teams the very best on the 10th of September. The SGLBA enjoys a productive relationship with the city, and we look forward to continuing that after the election, regardless of the outcome. This year, the SGLBA is 35 years old, which I think personally is no mean feat for a non-profit organisation run entirely by volunteers. many of whom are here this evening, and many of whom all have very busy careers. So on behalf of, from me, thank you team. It's always a great privilege to work with you, so please thanks to the SGLBA team. We strive to facilitate events and opportunities through through which members and guests alike can grow their professional networks, promote their business and gain knowledge. And we do this either directly or in partnership with organisations like Landry & Rogers. Membership is open to everybody, LGBTI or ally. We really believe it's important to encourage a diversity of attendance and thus opportunities at our events, and this is just one of a number of examples of how we'll be doing that throughout the coming year. On your way out, after you've had a chance to enjoy the very delicious canapes and work the room a little bit, you'll be able to pick up a bag full of some literature from SGLBA and Landry & Rogers. I would like to introduce Jodylee Bartal of Landry & Rogers, SGLBA's legal partner. Jodylee is the Special Counsel, Family and Relationship Law at Landry & Rogers. She was admitted to practice in November 2000 and joined Landry & Rogers in 2008. She's ranked as a rising star in the 2016 edition of Doyle's Guide for Family Law and was a finalist for Special Counsel of the Year in Lawyers Weekly Women in Law Awards 2015. SGLBA is absolutely delighted to work with Jodylee and the team at Landers & Rogers, so please welcome Jodylee Bartal.
Hi everyone, it has been our absolute pleasure at Landry & Rogers to co-host this very special event tonight. Thank you again to the SGLBA and also to the Star Observer, and of course to the candidates for coming along this evening. We are thrilled to have renewed our sponsorship of the SGLBA this year and really value the opportunity to engage with the LGBTI community and with the business community more broadly. Earlier this year, we launched the Sydney practice of our firm's family and relationship law team, having had an established team in our Melbourne office for the last 26 years. We now are a team of 30 family lawyers. I'd like to just very quickly introduce you to the newest member of our team and partner in our Sydney practice, Colette McFawn, sitting up the front here. Colette is an accredited family law specialist and former Judge's Associate. She's worked exclusively in family law since 2004 and has extensive experience in matters involving non-traditional family structures. The Family and Relationship Law team at Landers is just so proud of our role in having established and now continuing and deepening our relationship with the SGLBA. I'd like to invite you now to please stay and have a drink with us and something to eat, and I look forward to meeting as many of you around the room as possible tonight, and thanks again for coming.
That's a wrap, folks. Thank
you very much for hosting us. Yeah, it's good work that you guys do with families. It's very tough family law. Nothing good there. Your job is to make it as easy the way. Yeah, law is very friendly for family. A bit black and white for business, but not. Yeah. Yeah. No. Because media on any legal matter, anyone that's giving you good legal advice will tell you. Yeah, there's only two people that win, and that's both lawyers. No offence. No offence, but it's no one likes that. Yeah.
She does that tell them. Do it.